The trade deadline is at 3 p.m. today. As I said, that's in a couple hours. And the Orlando Magic are making a variety of moves in probably the most confusing rebuild I've seen in the past 3 or 4 seasons. I don't understand what the Magic are doing. And to me, in my opinion, they're going into a rebuild mode almost inexplicably. The Magic are trading Nikola Vucevic to Chicago for Otto Porter Jr., Wendell Carter Jr., and 2 first-round picks, one in 21, one in 2023. I don't know whether those are unprotected or not. If they're unprotected, that's a tremendous win for the Magic, and I can see why they took that deal. But if they're protected picks, then that kind of just devalues the value of that trade for me. And we'll talk about, the specific trades separately, but we're kind of just going through the gigantic bulk shopping version of the trades with Orlando today. And then the Magic also sent Evan Fournier to the Celtics for 2 second-round picks. And then, about 20 minutes later, the Magic sent Aaron Gordon to Denver for Gary Harris, a 2025 protected first-round pick, and RJ Hampton, and Gary Clark was also sent in that deal. So in total here, the Magic received 2 second-round picks, 3 first-round picks. One of them is protected. The other 2, we'll see. They also received Otto Porter Jr., Wendell Carter Jr., Gary Harris, and RJ Hampton, and they gave up Aaron Gordon, Nikola Vucevic, Evan Fournier, Gary Clark. So 4 players and 5 picks for 4 players. The haul isn't the worst I've ever seen. It's not good. It's not necessarily bad. I wouldn't expect a lot of these players to stay around long term. My issue with the trades isn't necessarily the haul. It's the rebuild itself. Yeah, I'm not completely against a rebuild. I'm not, against resetting your assets, getting draft capital. I'm not against any of that at all. My issue is the fact that the Magic are doing it right now, in a time which it just makes no sense to me. The Magic would be a really good basketball team if Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz weren't injured for the entire season. Those are probably 2 out of the 4 of their best players. It's 2 starters, essentially, that are out for the season. Markelle Fultz is playing a lot better. Jonathan Isaac is a really good defender. On top of Vucevic having his best season, if Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac weren't injured, this is a playoff team. And as we've seen the past few seasons, the Magic are a capable playoff team. They usually get slotted in the 8th seed and take a round off of whichever the top seed that is. So, they do have some talent. It's just a matter of finding the right pieces to build around the young talent. So, with Isaac and Fultz injured, and with Vucevic having his best season, to me, this seems like a gigantic panic rebuild. And I do not for the life of me understand why. I don't understand why the Magic are saying, okay, now is the time to rebuild, as opposed to a year from now, 2 years from now. I don't get it. And, the logic in saying, okay, Vucevic is having his best season, we should trade him, that logic, more or less, is pretty much correct. But out of everybody that, could have been or should have been traded, Aaron Gordon is the one that probably would have been traded out of all of those. It's weird. It's confusing. Breaking down everything separately, Vucevic to Chicago, so the Chicago Bulls, for Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter Jr. and 2 first-rounders. I think it's a good deal for Chicago. You get Markkanen and Vucevic at the 4 and the 5. There is some talent in Chicago. Zach LaVine is a borderline superstar. There's some debatability on how much of a superstar he actually is, but that's a really good piece for Chicago, and they shred Otto Porter Jr.'s contract. Now, granted, I think Vucevic is being paid $29 million. Otto Porter Jr. is being paid $28 million. He signed a 4-year, $28 million contract. So the money more or less is going to equal out for Chicago. And I think Vucevic is a much better player than Otto Porter Jr. is. So that's going to work out a lot better for Chicago. But for the Magic side of things, you're trading away your only all-star player to get Otto Porter Jr.'s massive, stupidly overpriced contract. I think I saw a stat that Otto Porter Jr. has made like $124 million in 8 seasons, which is more than the entire NFL apart from 10 players. Like, it's a gigantic contract for a player that you're probably not going to keep. And then there's Wendell Carter Jr., who has struggled since he's been drafted. And then you get 2 first-round picks, which may or may not be protected. It's hard to grade who won or lost the trade. I think Chicago has won that aspect of the trade. And realistically, my entire point in saying I don't understand why the Orlando Magic are rebuilding is because you got to think about everything that's happening outside of the league. COVID, basketball in college just generally being more inconsistent now. Players haven't had as much time to develop. They haven't had some consistent development this past season, and the product is going to be like that for a couple of seasons moving outward because players have lost so much practice time. They've lost so much developmental time due to this pandemic that's been happening. And I don't necessarily want to say, okay, COVID is going to wreck the rebuild, but those draft picks not only are going to see less value because the Chicago Bulls got much better, but they're also going to see less value because I think the talent pool is not going to be as good in the upcoming seasons. Now, again, it's important to remember that one of those picks is in 2021, one of those picks is in 2023. Whether or not the talent pool recovers by 2023, that's something that's yet to be seen. Then there's Evan Fournier moving to the Celtics for 2 second-round picks. I love this trade for Boston. If there was anything wrong with the Celtics this year, it's very evident that without Marcus Smart, there needs to be another person that can score, and Marcus Smart even wasn't really that gifted offensively. It was more of a defensive defender than anything else, but Evan Fournier really is going to take some of the load off of Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I really love this trade for Boston. Great trade for Boston. And then there's Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets for Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and a 25 protected first rounder. The Nuggets, I love this trade for the Nuggets as well. Aaron Gordon was probably going to be traded regardless, but as soon as Vucevic got traded, you knew that Aaron Gordon was going as well. Denver is scary. I mean, with LeBron and AD going down in the West, and obviously I'm assuming that those two will be back in time for the playoffs, but my God, Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic on the same team, same backcourt, or front court rather, along with Michael Porter Jr. and Murray. That's a really good basketball team. And I don't really foresee many people being able to stop Denver, apart from the Lakers in the West. I think this trade makes Denver better than the Clippers. I think this makes Denver better than the Suns. If AD and LeBron are not completely healthy, look out for Denver, I think. But as it pertains to Orlando, so you get Gary Harris, which is a really fine player, good 3-and-D guy. RJ Hampton, probably a rotational player. And then you get Otto Porter Jr., Wendell Carter Jr. I just don't understand why the Orlando Magic are deciding to do this now, as opposed to 2 or 3 seasons from now. You had 2 years left on Vucevic's contract. If Aaron Gordon wanted out, fine. He probably was. He should have been given that out anyways. I mean, he's been frustrated for the past couple of seasons anyway. I feel like Aaron Gordon would have been gone regardless. But Vucevic having 2 years left on his contract, he's 31, veteran. He's playing some of the best basketball of his career. The Magic are playing in the East, so they're more than likely going to make the playoffs pretty much every single time if everybody's healthy. To have an injured Orlando Magic team completely sell everybody in a fire sale just feels like a panic rebuild to me, and I just don't get it. And I feel like this is the wrong time to do it, considering that the talent pool coming out of college is probably not going to be very good for the next couple of seasons. So to say that Orlando won any of these trades, I think would be a bit of a stretch. Yes, they got a pretty decent haul for it. It's not the worst I've seen. It's not the best I've seen. I'm not crazy about Orlando taking on Otto Porter Jr.'s $28 million contract. I mean, if Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter Jr. and 2 first-rounders, whether or not they're protected, is the best package that you could have gotten for Vucevic, I mean, hell, if that's the best package that you could have gotten, if that was what they considered to be a substantial haul, you might as well just keep Vucevic. I mean, Wendell Carter Jr. can get better, absolutely, but Otto Porter Jr., his contract is too big for the level of play that he brings to a basketball team. I'm sorry. It just seems so rushed and so panicky to me. It feels like, well, we're not making the playoffs this year. Everybody's hurt. Let's just sell the farm and retry again. It's like, even the draft picks that you're getting for, everybody that you're sending off. You're losing Aaron Gordon, all-star. Losing Vucevic, all-star. Losing Fournier. Great, shooting guard, off-screen ball handler kind of thing. Makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say. Now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.